The grace of Jesus Christ, the love of God, the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. It was 3 years ago yesterday that Holly and I were sitting in the chapel on the campus of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, anxiously waiting to find out where we would end up, which turned out to be here. And while most of that day and week are now a blur, there is one thing that I was thinking about as I was watching the call service this past week for this current group of guys going out. And in order to tell that story, I have to frame it a little bit. See, our last 2 quarters there, Holly and I lived about 20 to 25 minutes from campus, and she worked another 25 minutes from that. So we would get up rather early, and I would make it to, I would drive from where we lived to the SEM, and I'd get there by like 6:30 so that she could then drive the next 20 to 25 to where she worked. And I would be there until her school day ended, and then she would come back. And so it was a long day, usually. And I don't think this was on call day specifically, but I know it was during call week of that year. Then I arrived at 6:30 as per usual. And when you get to the campus that early, there's usually only one place open, and that's where everybody eats lunch, or breakfast, I guess. But there's this little side room that I would go and sit in. And the side room was kind of like a hallway between the main dining area and where the placement office was. And so usually people would walk through, going from there to the office. And so it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. I've been there. I have no homework to do, so I'm just kind of messing around. And this older guy walks in. You give the polite nod to say hello. Goes by me, goes into the placement office, and then I see somebody I know. Right, say hi. They go into the placement office too, and maybe it's like half hour, 45 minutes later, they come walking out, and I nod to my buddy, and then this guy, and I have no idea who he is, who starts talking to me. You a 4th year, blah blah blah. Didn't ask his name. He didn't ask mine. We're just chatting up like we're old friends. And then somebody else comes out of the office who is connected with this guy, and they walk away. And it's about this time chapel is about to start, and I've got nothing else to do, so I'm going to go to chapel, and I take my usual spot in the very last pew on the far left, really out of the way. And 5 minutes later, this guy comes walking back. I just had this conversation. He walks by me, and then kind of notices I'm sitting there and stops and chats a little bit, and then goes on to find a place to sit down. And the other guy he was with stops and turns to me and goes, "How long have you known President Hennings?" 5 minutes. Oh, really? I wouldn't have thought that just based on the way you two were talking. I said, "No, yeah, I just kind of met him." And then he walked away and sat down next to him. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I say to President Hennings? Was I a smart aleck? Because that usually happens. And not only that, now I know that this is one of the district presidents who could very well be my district president within the next 24 hours. I had no idea. Right? So I'm replaying this conversation in my head. Was I an idiot? What came out of my mouth? And it's not just that he's still the Texas district president. 3 years later, I'm thinking about this. He is now the chairman of the Council of Presidents, which is kind of a big deal. And I doubt he remembers me, but I remember that moment. How long have you known President Hennings? 5 minutes? And just, the things that go through your head at that point. What did I say? Was it helpful? Because there are conversations, there are moments that we have in our lives where after they're done, you're kind of either left with your own thoughts or you're left wondering, did I say something helpful? Or, maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less funny. You're thinking of some pain that you're feeling because of the conversation that just ended. We all have moments like that where we're talking or we're engaged with other people, and then when it's done, you're just kind of left to break apart the conversation in your own head. That's kind of what's going on this morning. 2 guys are walking down the road to Emmaus. It's like a 7-mile walk, which doesn't sound fun to me, but hey, we didn't really have a car back then. So they're walking around the road, and here comes Jesus, right? And they don't know it's him. Their eyes are being kept from seeing that it's him. He kind of, strolls up beside them, and they're really downcast. It says that later on, that they were sad. And they're sad because they're kind of breaking apart in their own minds and with each other what had just went on Good Friday. I mean, they kind of can't really believe it. So Jesus says, hey, what's going on? And you can imagine their shock and disbelief. Do you not know? Are you the only person in town who hasn't heard what was going on? Clearly, Jesus knew a little better what was going on. But they didn't realize that. So then they begin to tell a story about how this Jesus of Nazareth was a prophet, a man sent from God, and how the people loved him, but the religious elite, they arrested him and they put him to death, and then they say, and we really thought he was the one to redeem Israel. And then to top it all off, right, some women from our group, they ran to the tomb this morning, and he wasn't even there. And they claim to have this experience with an angel, but you can just hear it in their voice. They just don't believe it. They don't believe what the women had said. They certainly don't believe that he was risen from the dead. And at that point, right, I think most of us would expect Jesus to sort of take off the mask and show himself. But he doesn't. He starts talking to them. Do you guys still not get it? Right? That Christ had to come and suffer these things before he could end up in his glory. And then he begins with Moses and all the prophets, and he opens up the scriptures to them. And they still don't quite get it. So they get to where they're going, and they pass. Jesus starts to pass by like he's going to keep on moving. And they're like, no, stay with us. The day's pretty well spent. So he agrees. And he sits down with them, and he breaks bread. And their eyes are open. And then he vanishes. As if the events of the last couple days weren't enough for them to sort through, they just walked with Jesus that they didn't recognize at the time, and the minute they recognize him, he vanishes. So they pick up, and they run back to Jerusalem. This 7-mile journey, right? They told him, don't go anywhere. The day's pretty far spent. But that doesn't stop them from getting up and going back to tell people what had happened. And they're kind of musing with themselves. Were not our hearts burning within us when he was opening up the scriptures? And they tell everyone that they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. So what do we do with this story? It's a great story. But we're kind of left to sort it out in terms of our own kind of experience. It's one thing to talk about the hope of Easter. It's another to talk about it in the midst of life when life is at its most difficult. It's difficult to talk about the hope of Easter when you're burying a loved one. It's difficult to talk about the hope that Jesus brings when you're not getting the diagnosis you want, when your bank account is not as full as you need it to be, when life comes at you and it doesn't stop, it's difficult to talk about what this hope might mean. And it's kind of hard to believe it. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. The disciples had a bit of an excuse. I mean, their eyes were kept from seeing Jesus. Our eyes aren't kept, but we let them be kept by the things that surround us, by the things that hurt us. And that's tough. I don't say that to sort of, heap law upon you. I say it to help recognize the reality of things. That actually there's a lot going on in our lives that makes this whole Christian life, this whole faith thing difficult. That was true enough for those who literally walked with Jesus, let alone those who are 2,000 years removed. But see, like them, Christ comes and opens up the scriptures for us. And he doesn't open them up in a way that sort of teaches you how to overcome all your obstacles. That's not what the scriptures are all about. They're actually all about Jesus, including this little story that seems to be about the disciples. It's really all about Jesus. It's about why he comes and dies, why he rises again, and what that might mean for you and I going forward when we're faced with difficulties and trials, when it seems like everything is telling us that this Jesus thing isn't really real. And like he came and was made known to them in the breaking of the bread, the same is true for us. Now, I can't say directly, right, because the text doesn't say that that was communion. But I'd be hard-pressed to find another explanation for it. Because Christ himself is revealed when the bread is broken. And week in and week out, Christ reveals himself again here in this place at the rail. Reveals himself to be the one who resurrected from the dead, the one whose life is yours in the breaking of the bread and in the cup that are his body and his blood for you. See, all of the scriptures, they point to Jesus. Actually, all of what the church does should point to Jesus. Our epistle lesson has this really famous phrase in it. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of the Lord stands forever. And maybe you've never wondered what that meant, and that's okay. But the reality of what that means is it doesn't mean the text on a page. It actually means Jesus. See, the word of the Lord endures forever because Christ endures forever, despite our inability to see him walking beside us. He's actually alive. He's actually engaged, and he actually comes to you the same way he did to those disciples in the breaking of the bread. And that may not fix our problems, but it does help us to see them in perspective. Because the one who comes to us in the breaking of the bread is the one who is not going to let us go on the journey alone. He walks beside us. He comes with us and walks through those difficult situations. It doesn't make it easier, but it helps us to know that those situations don't define us. What defines us is the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, who came to you in your baptism, who comes to you every time you hear his word preached, who says to you, "You are my child, I will never let you go." Who comes to you again this morning at the rail and says, "Here I am for you. I'm not going anywhere." All of it points back to Christ, the one who has overcome all things for you. Amen.